So I will look for it.
I'm going to share my screen. Dion, what do you see on my screen?
I see our homepage.
Okay, good. And you're getting everybody.
Do you want me to let them in now? I haven't received Marquita yet.
We're up on Facebook Live, by the way.
Go ahead and let them in.
Okay. Here we go.
Hi, everybody. Glad to have you here.
Good to be here.
Good to be here.
Hi, Allison.
Hey, Carol, how you doing?
I'm fine. We are going Facebook Live, so
Okay.
lively.
My virtual backgrounds have decided to stop working, so I'm going to turn my camera off because we might have dogs and cats and people running up behind me.
You might want to turn off your audio as well.
Yep, I've got a wind tunnel going too.
Carol, this is Dion. I did the same thing and turned my microphone off. So when you're ready for questions from chat, I'll just wait for your prompting.
Okay, and yeah, don't forget to unmute yourself. And you're going to be watching the guests as they enter, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. I am looking for our presenter, Marquita. If you are here, please let me know. I know she said she was going to be here, so. Thanks everybody for waiting. We'll give it a couple of more minutes.
Okay, I just muted it. Hello.
I just transferred 6,000 out of my account, my personal account.
Hey, we can hear somebody, so you might want to mute.
Carol, Carey has joined us if you would like to make her a co-host. And you're still muted, Carol.
I don't think Carrie wants to present this morning, so it is going to be Marquita and myself. And Marquita, if you are on, would you please let us know?
Carol, I've just admitted Marquita.
Oh, fabulous. I don't have to worry about that. Marquita, are you up and going yet? There we go. I'm going to, oh gosh. Marquita, I'm going to make you a co-host, and I have a few announcements before we get started, but just to make sure, could you unmute yourself and tell us you're here?
I'm here. Thank you very much. And I will have a slide, so I appreciate being added as a co-host.
Fabulous. Okay. All right. Well, it's 10 a.m. and I've got a few things to say before we get started with our program. I do want to thank everybody for being here. I know that there's many of you on the Zoom meeting and then many more on our Facebook Live. And we're hoping that this program is going to genuinely help you get through this devastating year. Before we get to the program, I do have two announcements. On Monday, the National Restaurant Association will begin a campaign to press Congress for another federal relief bill before the end of the year. I need you to keep an eye out for that campaign and join our voice to get Congress to support restaurants here in New Mexico with another round of federal relief. And I do want to show you that you can go to our website. Our website is nmrestaurants.org. Scroll down. And if you want to get this information in your email inbox, and I know a lot of you have a lot of email coming, but I am going to say that the things that we send to you are really, really important, especially in this pandemic year. But scroll down, go to subscribe here and subscribe to be on our newsletter list. If you do that, we will be sending you information about that National Restaurant Association campaign. And every time you take action on these campaigns, it makes a huge difference in what Congress does. And we really need them to pass some support and federal relief for us before the end of the year, because Congress won't be getting back in and doing anything until late January. So it's really important that we get that that message to them now, to before they come home, please get us that federal relief. Also on Monday, the Albuquerque City Council will be voting on a sick leave ordinance that will make all businesses with 3 or more employees pay a paid time off benefit to all employees, and that's temporary, part-time, and full-time employees. So I ask that you text jobless to 52886 and let City Council know how debilitating another layer of employment restrictions will be for the restaurants that are already reeling from this pandemic shutdown. And again, you can go to our website, and this is the top of the page, and right here is where you can go to send this message. If you want to text jobless to 52886, it brings you to the same place. And more and more, we are using this technology to get messages to our elected officials. All you have to do is fill out this contact information, and this letter will be sent. Now, if you are in Albuquerque, I ask that you give some of your own information on this letter, just to let folks know, city councilors know how devastating this pandemic has been for you. And if you're not in Albuquerque, do this anyway, because the more messages they get, the more likely they are to vote this down on Monday. Really appreciate you doing that and taking the time to take those actions. Right now, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Marquita Russell. Marquita is the CEO of the New Mexico Finance Authority. Welcome, Marquita, and thank you for spending the time with New Mexico restaurants to get this grand information out so that these businesses that are locked down right now have some hope to get them through the rest of this year. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I appreciate the invitation and for your time this morning. If I could share just a couple of slides so
Please.
that we can go through the program. And of course, I woke up this morning with a cough because that's how that would go. If I have to do 6 webinars, that's the day that the allergies are going to say, this is your Thursday. So apologize. I've got a cough drop. I'm going to try to minimize that impact, but it's better than the hacking that I just endured. So again, my name is Marquita Russell. I'm the CEO of the New Mexico Finance Authority. Many of you may not know the Finance Authority. We are primarily an organization that finances public infrastructure and capital equipments. So lots of fire trucks, water systems have been financed through the Finance Authority. We were created back in 1992 primarily for that purpose, but we've expanded over the years to include funding for businesses, nonprofits that are essential backbones of New Mexico's communities and economy. Our mission is to advance New Mexico by financing those impactful, well-planned projects. And I would note that impactful does not mean large. It means important to the community it serves. And so there's not a project that's too small for us to take on. I will just start with, as part of the first special session in June, NMFA was named as the administrator of a $400 million state business recovery loan fund. And that provides loans of up to $75,000 to businesses that experienced significant revenue loss in April and May of this year. That application is open through the end of this year. And while there's been some conversation about extending the program and hopefully expanding it and, kind of tweaking it a little bit to make it more accessible to New Mexico businesses, there's no certainty that that will happen. So we would encourage folks to look at it if you haven't already. nmfinance.com is where you will find that information, and there's a page set aside for the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. It's where you get the application and information. That loan program, again, I'll just spend a minute, up to $75,000, interest only for 3 years with interest paid annually. And that interest is 1.325. It's a very 1.625, very low cost security blanket to get you through these next several months. If you haven't accessed it already, please take a look at that. But today I'd like to talk to you about the Small Business CARES Relief Grants. This is a program that was made available through the second special session. Governor Lujan Grisham and the legislature dedicated $100 million of the federal stimulus money to NMFA for the purpose of operating a grant program for small businesses that were hard hit. That's obviously hospitality, restaurants, bars. You all were hit particularly hard, and this program notices that and puts aside money for that program. The statute that created this, or the legislation, I should say, that created this, allows me to make grants of up to $50,000 to businesses with 100 or fewer employees. The application for this will open next week. Starting Monday, we expect a noon opening through Friday, December 18th, and again, a noon closing. So we'll give folks just about 11 days in which to complete applications. So we want to get as much information and as specific of information we can get out in advance. A couple things that the legislation did other than say up to $50,000 and to businesses with 100 or fewer employees. It requires that I make certain that the funds are dispersed or distributed equal across New Mexico. So we need to ensure that there's geographic dispersion. We've done that by earmarking funds for businesses located in rural areas. And really in this instance, rural areas is anything outside of a city with 50,000 or more in population, and the area that's the 10-mile area that surrounds that. So the majority of the footprint of New Mexico will really fall into that rural area, but obviously the areas that are concentrated, there's a significant number of businesses. So we have a 40-60 split there. The legislation also requires that NMFA give priority to businesses in the hospitality and leisure industries. We've done that in a similar format by putting 20% of the money aside for accommodation businesses, and that'll be those that fall into that NAICS code of 721. 20% will be set aside for food services and drinking businesses. That's NAICS code 722. And then 15% for all other leisure businesses. And really that falls into that NAICS code of 71, and that's the art, entertainment, and recreation. We are putting aside 3% for destination marketing organizations, and that's those organizations like some chambers of commerce, tourism alliances, convention center operators, folks that bring in festivals, that bring in tourism, money from outside into New Mexico that helps drive our economy. So we are setting aside money for those organizations to make sure that they stay alive through this really difficult time, because their work is important for us a year from now. If we're not feeding them now, we're not getting heads into the state in the next year. So we're putting aside 3% of the money for that. And 2% of the money is being set aside specifically for non-employer businesses. And that will be everything from sort of the self-employed sole proprietor. They're only, got themselves that they're paying, or real estate holding companies. So, there's a broad diversity of non-employer business types. For our purposes, they're being categorized similarly, and 2% of the money is being set aside for that. And lastly, the legislation requires that NMFA give priority to businesses that are experiencing severe economic impact. And we've decided that the best way to do that is to calculate each applicant's profit and loss divided by the number of employees. We'll take that calculation to sort of normalize impact, and we'll take that calculation and prioritize the applications. So should there be more applications, demand for the money than we have money available, we'll be funding them in the order of priority based on that profit and loss per employee. If we don't have a demand for the money, then everyone would get funded. We anticipate, however, that there will be significant impact. And even within industries, you're going to have a diversity of how well a business was already set up to handle the conditions that were brought on by the pandemic. And so, there is a differentiation then of how those folks will be treated. So if there was a high loss per employee, they will obviously be prioritized over someone that did fine. It's not to say that we weren't impacted, but we have to make some decision about how to give priority to severely impacted organizations. So that's what we've done. As a result, what you'll see is based on urban and rural, hospitality, $12 million are being made available for hospitality organizations in urban areas and 8 in rural. Restaurants, similarly, 12 in urban, 8 in rural. Destination marketing organizations, that's those chambers of commerce and tourism alliances, 1.8 million in urban, 1.2 million in rural. Other leisure and hospitality, 9 and 6. And then all other businesses are going to be grouped into that last category of 24 million in urban and 16 million in rural. And then lastly, non-employer businesses, we've split those up in that geographic division as well. Grants are going to be ultimately awarded, though, on the size of the number of employees with number of employees that the business has. So non-employer businesses, those that do not report wages to the Department of Workforce Solutions, the grant amount that they will get is $2,000. The organization that has 1 to 5 employees, these are not contract employees, and it doesn't differentiate between full-time and part-time, but 1 to 5 employees, they're able to get $10,000. It's a flat amount. It's not an up to amount. It's a flat amount. Similarly, 6 to 15, flat amount of $15,000. 16 to 25, flat amount of 25, and so on. So it'll max out at $50,000, and that's for organizations that have 76 to 100 employees. Now, we understand, particularly with you all, that you have been incredibly hard hit and not been able to bring your organization up to the full amount of capacity that you typically would. So we're allowing applicants to go back in time to pre-COVID employment levels for purposes of determining the grant amount. So you can submit any month in 2019 up to actually basically September of 2020. But you'll have to show us as documentation of your employment level. You'll have to show us a copy of that quarterly wage report that you submitted to the Department of Workforce Solutions. So if you are a very large organization and in normal pre-COVID times have more than 100 employees, it would probably be in your best interest to use employment levels during the COVID times, because it's likely that you ended up having to cut your payroll and your employees. So that would make sense for you to use a current time. If you are someone, you're a bar or a restaurant that has a pretty big seasonality swing, and maybe that's, May to August, it would make sense for you to go back in time and use those numbers from 2019. So our goal here is to make that 100 employee as open as possible to the businesses, and we respect and understand that seasonality really drives those numbers, and that for many businesses, particularly in your industry, it's not a straight line. You don't have just a few employees all year. So that's the purpose of this, and we hope that does enough to really to take into consideration some of the difficulties that you've had in accessing funding before. We are going to be processing these applications not on a first come first served basis, but we're also not going to wait until all the applications are in. So we're going to break these applications up into 3 rounds, basically. The first round will be from the moment we open on Monday, which will be again in the afternoon, until Thursday, December 10th at noon. So all applications that were received in that time frame will be prioritized based on that profit and loss per employee, and we'll fund up to $40 million based on those geographic splits and based on those industry splits. And if there's money available in what I'll just call a pot, let's say not all the hotels were utilized from a rural area, that money will roll over into the rural hotels for the second round. So we will, for the first 2 rounds, you will ultimately be putting $75 million aside for those first 2 rounds. At the end of the second round, if there's still unused money, then we will be looking to redistribute so that we're not keeping up, artificially keeping out money that it needs to continue to be set aside. If we don't see demand, we're going to move it over to the areas that do see demand, because we want to make sure we can serve as many businesses as possible. And frankly, we lose the money on December 28th. Unused funds on December 28th get transferred over to the state for the unemployment trust fund. So we really want to make sure that we've got as much money out as possible, including those priorities, but ultimately our goal is to get it out to the businesses in that time frame. So the second round will be all applications that were submitted through noon of December 15th. $35 million will be made available. If your application was submitted as part of round 1 but not funded, you will automatically be rolled over into round 2. So you only have to apply once, even if you don't get funded in that sort of first round. That application stays in the mix until the very end. So you only apply once. And then lastly, round 3, we have put aside $25 million, again, to make certain that people who didn't have the ability to apply early on, maybe they were missing a document or they didn't find out about it, or for whatever reason, we want to make sure that there's money available at the end for people who don't apply, but there will be less money, honestly. So $25 million will be made available for all applications that have not yet received awards by the close date of December 18th at noon. please just apply once. It will complicate our lives tremendously if you apply more than once, and could really end up hurting the chances of the business. And then lastly, we'll note that incomplete applications will not be processed. I'll go through a little bit of the application overview, but generally speaking, we're going to say you need to submit these documents, and if you don't submit them, or if you submit a blank piece of paper in order to hit submit, that's going to be a problem. So please submit what you can, but try to make sure it's a complete document, because it ultimately will hurt your chances of being funded. So the grants may be used for regular business expenses that couldn't be paid because of revenue declines, and you can't play it without the assistance of a grant, or expenses that you incurred due to the pandemic, like personal protective equipment, or retrofitting your business, either with technology or new pieces of equipment, furniture, in order to meet safety guidelines. So if you were a restaurant and you had to basically take your business outdoors, all those costs, we want to know what those look like so that we can justify the grant. We're not looking for documentation. You don't have to submit receipts. We need the categorizations so that we can demonstrate to the feds when they come back later that these were actual losses that were incurred. And so, that we can justify that they're not projected losses, that they were actual losses, but not documented. We're not going to ask for pieces of paper. The business must meet eligibility guidelines. I'm sorry. Any business that has met eligibility guidelines is able to apply for the funds. So if you got PPP, or you got EIDL, or maybe you got both, or you got a grant from either the city or the county, all of you are still able to apply. We are not backing out any of those monies. So we understand in particular there have been limited pots of funds made available, and some businesses have been hit really hard, and those limited dollars aren't covering enough of the loss to keep folks alive until our operations normalize. So we're not backing out anything. All of those funds are still available for you. But we'd note that these are federal grants, and so there are federal strings attached to them. So we're not asking for documentation now. If we needed to go back because the Office of the Inspector General says we need documentation, we're going to be going back to the businesses and asking them for some of that information. So the upfront good news is you don't have to find the receipts. The bad news is that you are going to have to keep some receipts. Eligible businesses pursuant to the enabling legislation are any nonprofits that are designated by the IRS as a 501c3, a 501c6, a 501c8. So the C3s are the charitable organizations. The C6s are those associations like chambers of commerce. C8s are like benevolent organizations, VFWs, that sort of thing. And then it also puts aside some money for 501c corporations that serve, I think the way they described it is veterans. I don't think that's a phrase that's used in the code anymore. So it would serve any member, past or present, of a U.S. armed force. So it's those organizations, and they may spread over specific code designations. So the statute was very broad in that. It also allows for-profit businesses, sole proprietors, partnerships, etc. The only caveat is that at least 51% of the business needs to be owned by a New Mexico resident. New Mexico resident is anyone that's domiciled in New Mexico. In our prior program, we were looking for verification of ownership based on your personal income tax returns. Here, we're going to be using driver's license or any other government issued identification card that shows your address. And we're going to need it for the person that submitted the application, as well as any owner that's going to get you to that 51% ownership requirement. So if you have 10 owners with 10% each, we're going to need to see 6 driver's license. If you have 4 owners with 25% ownership, we'll need to see 3. So anything that gets you to that 51% mark, and you will need to see a copy of that. So NMFA is using a third-party system called FormStack. It's a highly encrypted, secure site. It's the same site we used for the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. It's very easy to navigate, and there's a lot of built-in logic for it. It'll be a little different because it's been designated solely for this program. And you'll access it through our website, nmfinance.com. We are requiring applicants to have checking accounts at federally insured financial institutions. Our goal here is to mitigate fraud as much as possible. We don't want somebody saying they are you and having the money directed someplace else. And it helps us tremendously to have federally insured financial institutions receiving the money, because we know they will have gone through some requirements for ensuring that you are who you say you are. We're also going to need to see a copy of a check, either a canceled check, preferably, or a voided check. So in case when you enter your information in, if there is, like I would do, a fat-fingered mistake, we want to make sure that we have a place to go so that we're not wiring money out to somebody else's account and the bank then having to trap the money because the account we said it is not the account they say it is. So that's an important bridge for us in case there is an error. So we will need to see that. But again, we'd like to either see void, like just a picture from your cell phone, or something from the bank that has a watermark on it that says that it was a canceled check. Because again, we don't, we're trying to mitigate against fraud. Any applicant that's been selected for funding or frankly notified of a declination will be done so through email. Once you are awarded the grant, you'll be sent a link to your email account to go in and digitally sign the grant agreement and sent back to us, and then we'll tee you up for that automatic deposit. So we are really warning folks to make sure that they get their put in the email that they check most frequently, and to check that around the application deadline dates. And then lastly, we are going to be requiring grantees to give us some reports, because we want to see what kind of impact was really felt. And we certainly want to look at it for the smallest of New Mexico businesses. We know at the federal level, a lot of small businesses weren't impacted, and we'd like that data to provide back to policymakers about, should they come back with additional funds or to hit additional targets, to have them see how it really did help. And we lack a lot of that information in New Mexico. So we'll be looking for status of your business. Are you still operational? Did you have to shut down? Or the number of employees that you currently have. The application system itself requires that businesses submit the documents in electronic format at the time they apply. It's an easy to use system. You don't have to create an account or anything like that, but it also doesn't allow you to save your work. So make certain you take stock of what we're asking for in advance. And there's lists on the website, because once you sit down, you really need to complete it at that time frame. I can't imagine if you have the information, it would take you more than 30 minutes. If you have your information, it should just take you 10 minutes. But again, make certain you've got the stuff before you sit down. If you submit blank pieces of paper when we ask you to submit a complete document, that will be considered incomplete. And though we would endeavor to work with all applicants, we also don't want to hold up those individuals that completed their application and need the money while we're chasing down one or two people who, they don't have the document. So we can't commit to helping folks. So we're telling you now that you will be put to the lowest priority if we can't verify the information you provided. We're not asking for a lot of attachments, but they are important. We've selected them because these documents will give us a lot of data that's necessary to validate your application. And again, watch the inbox, look at your junk folder, your spam filters, make sure you've cleared folks for anyone at nmfa.net or at formstack.com. We're implementing some new technologies as well to make sure that your email system likes our emails, but there's some hyper spam filters out there, and we'd really want to make sure that that doesn't happen. It happened in the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund, and that ultimately just delays your receipt of the funds. It doesn't eliminate your ability, but it does delay your funds. So the other information the information you'll need to complete the application is information about what NAICS code you fall into. That's the North American Industry Classification Code. For those of you that aren't economics nerds, that's going to be found on your tax return, if nothing else, because you have to tell them what business you're in. You've had to file it with a bunch of other information. We'll have links on the website to tell you, where you should put that in. But if you're, an accommodations business or a food and drinking business, please make sure you get that right, because we've set aside funds for you and we will be verifying those in particular. We're using a system that actually verifies the tax ID number and the NAICS codes to say, yep, that's correct. So make sure you get that part right. The other thing that we're going to ask you to input into the application but not attach is information relative to your revenues and expenses. So we're looking for cash receipts. The fact that you've done business is great, but if you haven't been paid for it, that doesn't pay your bills. So we're looking on a cash basis for your cash receipts between April 1st and November 30th of 2020. And we want to make sure that, even if you haven't got your complete information for November, give us as much as you can. A lot of businesses were impacted again by the newer health orders. So that's important for you to estimate your either additional costs or revenue so that we can give you credit for that loss or for that additional revenue. The other things that you'll need to actually upload are your 2019 business federal tax return. And that's, if you are a sole proprietor, that's going to be basically your personal income tax return with your Schedule C. We really need to see the Schedule C. We'll need a copy of the quarterly wage report that supports the number of employees that you say you had for whatever period. Again, the quarterly report would be 3/31/2019, because that takes in January through March through September 30th. So we're not yet at a new quarter end. So it's that time period that we're looking at. Your bank information and a copy of either a cancel or avoided check, and those driver's license we talked about. That's the application process. It should be relatively fast. We anticipate getting all the money out by December 24th. And certainly if you're in one of the earlier rounds, well before that, we do batch direct deposits. We put together some pretty good processes for the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund, and we're really lucky that we're able to pivot all of those into this program and quickly get money out the door for New Mexico businesses. And with that, I would either stand for questions or just thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Marquita. And I know we have a ton of questions. Before we do that, I want to let people know that your website already has a lot of this information on it. And so if they're curious, because you went through your slides fairly quickly, and can we get a copy of your slides?
So the slides will be, I'm actually going to do the same presentation at 12:30 today through the Economic Development Department. We're going to have a webinar, and that'll be posted on our website, and the slides will be part of that. So the slides will be on the website this afternoon. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, this is the one. So I went through this morning, and the application links again are coming on Monday the 7th in the afternoon. Is that correct?
That's right.
So you will be able to go to this website, nmfinance.com/CARES continuity grants, and get your application here. And then there's more information, the documents required, et cetera. So I just want people to know that besides your presentation right now, there is places on the website that they can go to get this information. And I know we've had a lot of questions, so I'm going to have Dion, would you unmute yourself and start with some of the questions?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Marquita, I've tried to put the questions kind of into categories, so hopefully we can do that. Eligibility wise, that's the bulk of our questions. Can you talk to us more about the location requirement and the ownership requirement? For example, we do have quite a few businesses that have even 80, 90% of their employees are in New Mexico, but their majority owner may live in another state. Is there anything to do to get around that requirement, or anybody to speak to about that?
So that's in law. And so, no, unfortunately, that's one of the things that we have no control over. And I think I can't get into the minds of legislators, but, we saw certainly in the debate on the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund, there they have a requirement of 80%. So they came down to 51%, which I thought was a really good stride. But there's nothing we can do if they don't have 51% ownership. Then that's where we land.
Okay, great. And is there any requirement based on when the restaurant was opened or when the business was opened? Some of them have opened their business but weren't able to open their doors due to COVID, or they just now opened in 2020. Is there any kind of requirement based on that?
If you don't have a tax return, you're going to have to give that explanation to us, and we'll provide that opportunity. But you will have to have filed your reports with taxation and revenue, or with some other place to say that we opened when we said we opened. So we'll provide an opportunity for that. Our intent is to not leave anyone out, but you will have had to at least filed some report, or you'd be subject to that. No,
Okay.
you'd have to file some report somewhere, because we certainly don't want people who just decide they want to file a report, file a grant application. So we have to have some evidence. So if you didn't file Schedule C with your 2019, then we're going to need to see, some other documentation. We haven't thought through that because we're about, 6 days, 6 days into the program development, but we'll put aside a process. My policies and procedures allow me to serve New Mexico businesses. And so if I need to, get additional information, then we will do that. So I'll put aside something. I'm glad that question came up.
Is there a revenue cap?
No.
Businesses, that make more than 5 million a year combined. Now, some of these, is the application based on federal ID number and on the taxes? So if I have a federal ID number that covers a restaurant and a hotel, or perhaps multiple restaurant locations, do I apply per location or per tax ID number?
Per tax ID number. So if they're all lumped under one, then unfortunately you're going to be limited to that one.
Okay. So if the business has two facets, a hotel and a restaurant that have different tax ID numbers, they would apply separately.
Yes.
Okay. And business owners, when we're counting employees, sometimes the business owners are the only employees. Would that still suffice?
If they're the only employee, they're likely not filing unemployment taxes on them.
Okay.
And so they would fall under those non-employer businesses. If you are filing them, and you are filing therefore a wage report with Department of Workforce Solutions, that's really what this comes down to. If you're reporting to Department of Workforce Solutions,
Great.
then it's going to be based on that. So that's how we determine the number of employees. If you don't report to them, or you don't supply us with a report, you're considered a non-employer business and would be eligible for that $2,000.
Okay, great. And can you tell us more about the formula of the profit and loss divided by number of employees? And what if you're at a loss there? How does that
If you're at a loss, you'll be more highly prioritized. So
Okay.
this is not an underwriting. We're trying to make sure that the individual businesses that suffered the most have access to the funding first. And so, we're going to, for some individuals, their cost of providing business went up, and they were limited to 25% revenue, but they had to keep their entire staff in. So it may be additional costs, it may be less revenue, whatever the factors are, or all of the above. We want to capture the real value of that impact. So we'll have categories for you so that you can tell us how the impact was realized. So we'll have your payroll information, we'll have your COVID related expenses, your business retrofits or adaption costs. So new technology, if you're a restaurant and you had to buy a bunch of new technologies or sign up for new services in order to do more efficient carry out or delivery systems, all of that gets, we want to capture the real costs that came to you as a result of this. So we'll have some categories there. And the goal here is to just get those primary categories because you were probably still paying loans during that time period. So, your fixed expenses didn't go away because your business did, because your employees, your customers did.
Of course, they're challenging me here with these questions. Okay, so earlier you had said a quarterly wage report between March 31st, 19 and 9/30/20 for the number of employees, but then later we had a time frame of April 1st to November 30th. So can they use either time frame?
So there's different things. So for purposes of determining the amount of grant, because of the seasonality of these businesses, we need to give folks an option for pre-COVID times. And for many, that pre-COVID time may just have been March or April. That's the time when they start to ramp up for business. And so you wouldn't see that, obviously this year. So we need to go back to January of 2019 to give the benefit of the doubt on the number of employees that they have. So for purposes of determining how much money you'll receive, you can start with any of the quarterly reports for the periods that are covered beginning January 1st. So the quarterly report for January 1st is March 31st. So that was the time frame for that. For purposes of determining impact of the pandemic or the health orders resulting, the emergency health orders, we're looking at April 1 through November 30th, those whole month periods. So those are two different things. They both consider employees, but those are two different things.
Okay.
So one thing I want to clarify there too is that you want to use that report for how many employees you have that's closest to the 76 to 100 employees. So figure that out, and because I want you guys to get the most money that you can possibly get, but that's what they're allowing you to do is use that quarterly report for getting closest to that larger number of employees, because that may have been April of this year or March of this year, you had a decent amount of employees and now you have very few, but they allow you to use that bigger number. So that's just a little clarification there. Go ahead.
So one of our commenters has 4 restaurants solely owned by a C Corp. So they have 1 tax return, but 5 quarterly wage reports. So should they submit all of it under one grant? Or because their wage reports are individual, should they do individual applications?
So they'll need to give us, they can only submit one application because if they only have one tax ID number, that's, we're going to go by that. Actually, let me get back to you on that.
It looks like each LLC has individual tax IDs.
Then you're fine. Then it would be individual LLCs would then have 4 different applications. It can be owned by the same group. It's the business that we're looking at because we're funding the business, the operation of the business.
Okay.
But so individual tax IDs are the key here.
It looks like most of the questions that I am seeing have been answered at some folks that may come on a little bit late. If a business has more than 100 employees, but multiple locations, are you still eligible? Even if all of the employees were at one point laid off, or you're just not eligible if you have over 100 under that tax ID?
So again, we're going to go back to what's most advantageous to you. So if you had 150 employees in January of 2020,
got it,
and you're down to 50 in July, use that July number.
Okay. Now, will you have a means for them to answer questions after this as well? Or if they feel like we missed something and a question wasn't answered, should they come to us or to you?
So we have put, I'm going to put this back up. We've done a
Thank
couple of
you.
things. We have established an email box for questions for folks that, they can't get a hold of someone. cares@nmfa.net. Carol had put up the website, which goes through, we're putting up our frequently asked questions. We're updating those as much as possible. We're currently working on getting those in Spanish put up. We'll have some videos on how to do the application for those people that don't like FAQs. They just like to watch. That's fine. And then lastly, we've put together a line for questions. That's that CARES line is 505-992-9696. And we are literally bringing those folks on now. So we really won't be in a position to answer anything more that's on the website until Monday when, we start to get, so real life questions are going to be harder to answer at this point. I guess I'll say it that way. You can still
Okay.
call. We have folks, but we don't have 10 folks that are trained. We have 3 folks that are trained right now. But also shoot us emails if that's important and you want to get very technical information in there and questions back. We have folks that are tending to that. More than one person tends to the cares@nmfa.net. Most of our questions right now are, when are you going to open the application? That's like 99% of our questions, but these technical ones are really important for us to capture, because the sooner we know that we need a heads up, the faster we'll put in procedures to help you get your application submitted. Our goal here is to be as inclusive and as broad as possible. So let us know what you need. In some instances, we may not be able to help, but if we can, we will.
You've been so thorough. We really appreciate it. Here's another one. If they've already received other funding from the CARES Act, like a PPP loan, would it affect their eligibility for these grants?
No,
Okay.
it does not affect their eligibility.
And when along the cycle, when do you think these might be paid out based on the different tiered deadlines?
Yeah, so our expectation is that it will take us about 5 days to process the applications and then tee up the ACHs. Once everyone's been processed and prioritized, we then have to put them through a fraud process, which should not take a long time. But the fraud check will go through and make sure that the applicant is who the applicant says they are, and that the business is what the business says it is, and then it does a cross-reference. So it's important for us to make sure that someone isn't taking your identity or taking your business and getting a grant on your behalf. That would be bad. Or someone who isn't in business and making up information and then takes the money away from some other really needy business. So that's an important tool for us. We expect that would take a day. So again, we're hoping 5 to 7 days. Weekends kind of complicate things, but our goal though is to get all the money out by December 24th, period. Because by Monday, December 28th, what I haven't wired out to somebody gets sent back to the state. So we are highly focused on getting it out before the 24th.
Is there on the site perhaps a list of documents that they could be assembling over the weekend so that when it is released on Monday, they are ready and set to go?
I hope so.
Okay.
We will put it on the website if it isn't.
Okay.
Again, like yesterday, nothing was on the website. So sometime between close of business yesterday and this morning, Lynn, our outreach person who's done a really good job getting this stuff put together, started populating frequently asked questions. I think it's all there, but
Okay.
if it's not, it certainly will be, because she's working around the clock to get this stuff updated.
Great. Yeah, we have some.
Just to
Sorry.
go into that just a little bit, because I do want people to know that on nmfinance.com, which is the finance authority website, there is, if you go down here, there's the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund. That is an application for a loan. And I would say that right now, what you really need to, this won't be there until the end of the year. Is that correct?
So the Small Business Recovery Loan Fund is through December 31st. We can't accept applications after that pursuant to the statute.
But
you
that
can
is
apply
a
for
loan that has to be paid back. It's a low interest loan, but it has to be paid back in 4
Yes.
years. And I would just say that for restaurants, that scares me a little bit, because we don't know where we'll be in 4 years. And then here is where you go to find the CARES relief grants again. And if you scroll down, they've got great information, required documents that you're going to be required to have. Definition of a New Mexico resident, grant amounts, use of grant funds. I mean, this is great information. Whoever is putting this in here, I read it this morning, and it's really good information. So use that as your focal point as you're looking at what documents you need to have together by Monday. And understand there's going to be 3 rounds of this, and they will get back to you if your application doesn't work for some reason. They'll let you know. Anything else, Dion?
Well, specifically with those documents for a profit and loss report in particular, would you want one combined profit and loss through November 30th, or would you want kind of monthly reports on a period by period basis?
So again, we don't want you to attach that
Okay.
because we're not going to be in the position to absorb everyone's different financial reporting systems. So we're going to ask you to translate that information. So have the information, but we're going to ask you to translate cash receipts, expenses related to COVID, expenses related to, like PPE, expenses related to business retrofits, other operating, cost of goods sold, other, salaries, that sort of thing. So we'll ask for categories of breakout because we're going to rely on this information to evidence that there was impact suffered by the business. So we don't want you to submit any financial reports. Please don't do that.
Okay, great.
That'll scare me. If you do it, we'll ignore it because we're going to be taking the information. The application system will literally do the math for us. That's why it's got to be input, and it's got to be input correctly. And we'll have the business tax return, so we'll have some ability to look and see if there's a lot of bluster in those numbers. That's why we ask for that.
Okay. And if you could just one more time clarify the multiple locations. I have one commenter who has one EIN number, but 2 different corporation businesses in 2 different locations. That would, again, be based on their tax returns and how those are filed?
Yes.
Okay. I think that might be as much as we can. I would encourage the commenters to either contact New Mexico Finance Authority or contact us directly, and we can help you with those answers and provide you links here at the Restaurant Association if there's anything that you think we might have missed through the questions, but I do believe everything has been covered.
And we will continue to update. I should note that, as I said, the legislation passed last Tuesday. It was signed last Wednesday. So we're getting this populated as quickly as we can. Our policies and procedures were approved on Tuesday. And so we're doing what we can to get this updated. As we get those quirky questions that may impact others, we'll update those frequently asked questions. So this is this is sort of our program central. All the data is going to be here. We're not keeping anything back. So if you don't see it here, contact us, because then that's probably something we haven't considered or articulated well. And so, yeah, contact us. If you don't see something here that impacts you, please call us or email us, and we'll escalate that issue so we can get that taken care of. We don't have a lot of time.
Right. And if we could just verbally clarify again that New Mexico Finance Authority is the administrator of this process. They have not made all of these rules. So if you have questions about, for example, the ownership issue, or you have out-of-state ownerships, they're following the rules that they were given by the legislators. So just to try to save you, Marquita, on any of those comments.
Yeah, and we
So
understand.
call your legislator, yeah.
Yeah, call your legislator.
There's no winning here. There's, $100 million is a lot of money, but it's not nearly the amount of money that's needed to really help the businesses now that we enter November, or finish November, enter December. So, they weren't really put in a position to help everyone. There's no way we can help everyone here. So they had to prioritize. And that unfortunately leaves out a lot of really important businesses and people that need money. So there's no winning here. There was no magic to get to serve everybody.
Well, we
Marquita, I
appreciate-
know there's another session for other businesses that aren't hospitality related at 12:30. Is there any reason for our folks to attend that session as well?
It's the same slide deck.
Okay,
I mean, we may answer different questions, but we will be posting it on our website after it's done. And we can then, put that information, eventually you could scroll to the question and answers, but it's the same slide deck. And same
Marquita.
presenter.
great.
Well,
Well, I believe that's all of the questions that I'm seeing here.
we certainly appreciate you being on and giving us all of this information, and bless you for what you're about to go through. I can't even imagine how difficult this time is going to be, but just know and let your employees know how important these grants are going to be to this industry getting through the end of the year. So thank
Well, I
you.
appreciate you saying that. I have to give a special shout out to your representative on the Economic Recovery Council. That person has Carrie Phyllis.
Carrie Phyllis, yes.
She has been really a driver for this. And, she was, when we presented framework, she was the one that was saying, but you have to think about this. And so, a lot of the things that we did to accommodate, particularly the food and beverage industry, was done because of really good questions that she asked and the concepts that she brought up. So you have a very good advocate on that council, because she's made the needs clearly known. And so we were able to hopefully accommodate to the greatest extent possible your particular issues.
Yes, and I think for the most part, you did what you could in the amount of time that was given to us. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And everybody, don't forget to, and I hate to push everybody onto your website Monday afternoon, but I want my members and restaurants to get these grants. So I'm going to push you there and hope that it doesn't break down.
So I would say, there's no difference between Monday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon.
Okay.
Because we're going to take every application that's submitted by noon on Thursday and prioritize them. So there's literally no difference. It's not in any way first come, first serve within the rounds. So you don't break yourself. And I would also say that this application system, form stack, was tested thoroughly. The fortnight rebate system went through there. They are able to take a lot of email at any one time, or I think it's mostly going to be in people's internet capacity that determines the pace of their ability to submit. It's not going to be the application system.
All right.
We tested that one.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here. This recording will be available on Facebook, and if we get the slide deck, we'll get that on our website as well, but it will be on the Finance Authority website. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and let's get through this stupid year. Thanks. Bye.